Welcome to Yankee Stadium.
In this off-season locked-out and holiday episode of The Frieze, Buck Showalter was almost the Yankees manager in August, but when the lockout ends, he will be in the dugout for the New York Mets. I'll talk to Mets content creator Tyler Ward about what Mets fans can expect. Next, Aaron Boone will be going to battle with a new coaching staff in 2022, and today we found out the names of some of the new coaches. Next, what does it mean that the Yankees have not signed Aaron Judge to an extension yet? And finally, we'll talk about the Yankees' prospects and who, if anyone, should be labeled untouchable. I'm Derek, and this is The Frieze.
Christmas Eve on IBC. You'll love it.
We found out in recent weeks that back in August, before the Yankees unleashed a 14-game winning streak, that Aaron Boone came very close to being fired and replaced by former Yankees manager Buck Showalter. After the season ended in disappointing fashion, many fans, myself included, were stunned when Aaron Boone was not only retained, but given a 3-year contract, effectively closing the window on Buck Showalter. However, Buck has landed on his feet. The Mets are coming off of one of the biggest spending sprees in baseball history, extremely aggressive before the lockout, and they were searching for a new manager to help put them over the top with all of their new talent, and they have landed on Buck Showalter, who has agreed to a 3-year contract. Showalter has 20 years of experience, mostly building teams up, including the early 90s Yankees. He does have 3 first-place finishes, 4 second-place finishes. However, he has just 1 playoff series win. I think the Mets have gotten themselves a good hire. I spoke with Mets content creator Tyler Ward, you may know him as Wardy NYM, to see how Mets fans are feeling about Buck Showalter.
How you doing?
Good, man. Appreciate you joining. How you doing?
I really appreciate it too. I mean, like I told you, I've been loving your content for quite a bit now. I would be 1,000% lying if I said that hasn't influenced me. So yeah, I'm very, very happy to get this conversation going and get to know you a bit.
Well, cheers to you, my friend. I like the Piazza jersey in the background. Makes me want to throw a broken bat at my monitor.
That's
all
funny.
right. So I got to say, Buck Showalter was the guy that I wanted to replace Aaron Boone. If Aaron Boone was fired, Yankees re-upped him for a 3-year contract. You guys landed a pretty good manager, in my opinion. How are your fans? You're pretty connected to the fan base. How are they reacting to this news, and what are they expecting from Buck Showalter?
Oh my goodness. I've been a content creator for just over a year now. I've never experienced something so universally accepted as Buck being new manager for the Mets. Not even close. Like, even when Francisco Lindor was traded for it, a lot of people were happy, a large majority, but there were still people that were concerned for different reasons, especially getting him signed to an extension. And once he did, all hell broke loose. But yeah, as a young Mets fan, I've never seen the fan base this universally happy about something. Every single time I would put up a poll, who do they want to be manager? It's, a resounding Buck by like 75, 80+%. So yeah, everyone's pretty happy. And more than anything, I appreciate that, because we understand as fans of, the 2 teams in New York, how divisive a fan base can be, right? I think that's a broken record. So to see everyone kind of join in on this and give him the respect and the time to really give a leash, even though that it's only going to probably wait until 1 bad game for things to change with us fans. Yeah, I can't complain. I'm very happy with how the fans have went about this entire thing.
So I got to say, he's one of the more organized managers that I've come across. He's very prepared. I like that he's so late in his career and hasn't won, oddly enough, because eventually he's going to run into one. He's going to have that good year. He's managing for his legacy. He's trying to win now. That's why I wanted him with the Yankees. But you guys have a stacked roster now, obviously bringing in Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer said that his preference was Buck Showalter. That can only help. What are you feeling about this Mets offseason so far? A lot of big names.
I mean, I would be lying if I said I wasn't just ecstatic about everything. I was very concerned going into the offseason, as would any other fan, when you have to handle gain a new manager, an entire coaching staff, a GM and or president baseball operations, and address parts of the rotation heavily, bullpen, outfield, infield. They have to address everything, and they're obviously not done yet. But for them to obviously do the big fish and Max Scherzer, that was something that I never in a million years would have thought actually came to fruition, so that was a beyond pleasant surprise. I still can't really wrap my head around that one, but Starling Marte, Mark Canha, Eduardo Escobar, doing those three things in one day. Billy Eppler coming in, all the doubts in the world about him from plenty of fans that view him solely on his stint with the LA Angels and not so much what he did with the New York Yankees, as you would know. Just everything has thankfully went perfect for the Mets so far this offseason. And again, they're not done, but as someone who does not believe that they'll be able to get every box checked off for what they have to do on their to-do list this offseason, they're doing everything humanly possible to really surprise everyone, including myself. So yeah, I couldn't be happier. I'm beyond ecstatic for what the future is going to hold for them. Hopefully with the lockout lifting sooner rather than later, but we all know that's probably going to drag out a bit.
Billy Eppler, I think, was a good hire for you guys. I think he's going to do a better job. He was with the Yankees for a while. I did have one qualm with Billy Eppler while he was with the Yankees. Back in the day when Bernie Williams was entering what would be his final season, actually, he was going into his final offseason. He ended up retiring. Billy Eppler was one of the voices that didn't want to bring him back. He opted for Doug Mankiewicz and Josh Phelps as kind of like an aggregate replacement for what Bernie Williams was giving them off the bench as a switch hitting outfielder and occasional DH. Those guys ended up doing nothing, and Bernie didn't get the send off that he deserved, in my opinion. So I've got a little bit of a bone to pick with Billy
Rightfully
Eppler.
So.
But I do think that overall his body of work serving under Brian Cashman, who was a GM he's still a GM, but he's been a GM for a long time. So he knows every trick of the trade. You would think that some of that at least has rubbed off, and it's good to see at least one New York team acting like a New York team, being aggressive out there. I'll tell you what, I think Max Scherzer is a good pickup for you guys, but I think ultimately one of the better pickups is going to be Escobar. As a switch hitter with power who can play all over the diamond, I think he's going to bring a lot of value to you guys.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I think Escobar is probably the sneakiest pickup so far regarding this team. Get him on 2 years, $20 million. I mean, how can you go wrong for a guy that, if you go through Baseball Savant and where their expected home runs were based on stadium, he would have had 38 with the Mets this past year. So especially after losing Javi Baez, this gives you a cushion now to really get creative with having him as either your short-term third base solution until the Mets bring up their prospect in Brett Beatty, who is expected to have an appearance at some point this year, or if they want to have him at second, if say they trade Jeff McNeil. So they still have ways to go about the infield, but Escobar, I'm very excited about. I think he's going to bring some much needed pop to this lineup. And on that deal, I mean, how could you go wrong for any team that would have signed him to that contract? I think would have been an absolute bargain. So yeah. And regarding Scherzer again, too, it's one of those things where when we look at how the offseason has transpired so far, it does feel like, to quote Spider-Man, we're in the multiverse right now. Like, who would have thought that would be all Mets and dead silent Yankees so far? It's very weird what's transpired here. I'm not surprised at all on what the Mets have done in regards to spending money. That's something that we're going to see them do year in and year out. But to basically see a huge drastic difference between the two clubs is a little surprising to me. I don't know exactly what your stance is right now once the lockout's lifted on how are they going to address, if at all, shortstop still, the outfield, those type of priorities, because obviously a lot of them are off the market now. So I guess as a counter to what you asked, my same question goes to you. What has your take been on this being completely lopsided so far? I know it's obviously something you're not as excited to discuss as you would like to be, but I'm awfully curious to hear your stance.
Well, I think that the Yankees are focused on clearing roster space right now. They've let go of a lot of their kind of marginal players, the Tyler Wades, the Andrew Velasquez's, Clint Frazier. For all of the talk that he gets, he really didn't give them very much beyond just being kind of a part-time outfielder. So I think the Yankees, what they're doing is trying to clear space to give themselves flexibility after the lockout ends. I still think they need to re-sign Aaron Judge, and I'll have more on that later in my episode. But I think that what they're doing right now is just kind of waiting to see how the new CBA unfolds. Obviously, when there's a new CBA, as one of the top revenue teams, they're going to be one of the most affected. I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit agitated at how docile they've been. You know, I had a number of names on my personal checklist, like Marcus Semien. I thought he would be a perfect fit for the Yankees. He killed the Yankees when he was with Toronto. We know he could hit in Yankee Stadium. I thought he would have been a nice addition for, possibly second base, and then you trade Gleyber Torres. I do think the Yankees are kind of lying in the weeds to make some big deals. I know they've got their eyes on Matt Olson. There's a number of players on the A's that could be acquired. Sean Murphy, their catcher. They have Sean Manaea. They have Frankie Montas. Manaea, I think, he's fallen off in terms of stuff in recent years, but he's becoming kind of a crafty lefty, which is something that I like and that plays well in Yankee Stadium more so than other ballparks. So I'm hoping that after lockout ends, we learn about some kind of trade between the Yankees and the A's to bring over multiple pieces and kind of patch up some of those holes. They have some dead weight on the roster still. I think they can do better than Gary Sanchez at catcher. I don't know who it is, but I was listening to Joe Torre's book on Audible the other day, and he said that, when he came to New York, Mike Stanley was still the catcher, and the first move they made was actually to go get Joe Girardi because he knew they were a little bit thin on pitching, and so it's important to have a strong catcher. The Yankees have a pretty good pitching staff, but it's a little bit top heavy in terms of, the Garrett Coles and the Jordan Montgomerys were pretty good. But after that, there's a lot of question marks. So I've personally been a little agitated that they haven't done much, but I got to feel that they know they need to do some, upgrading to the roster, and we're going to see something as soon as lockout ends. As far as the Mets go, one of your guys' free agents is Michael Conforto. And the Yankees need a left-handed bat. I've heard a number of fans talk about bringing him over because he had a down year, so it would be kind of like buying low. Give me a scouting report. I haven't seen him play much. I know he was a highly regarded prospect, but I really haven't had a chance to watch him since the World Series a couple of years ago.
I would really prefer not to try to sway Yankees fans into wanting Michael Conforto, but I'll do my best here because you're talking to someone who's my favorite player is Michael Conforto. Really, since I started following baseball every day, because I'm new in the baseball game. I'm not nearly as seasoned as other fans, but Michael's been my guy, and I've loved him for so many different reasons. And one of the big things that I've always appreciated about him is his ability to hit for opposite field and to hit for power as well. He spreads the field like no tomorrow, especially as a lefty bat. And something that was a huge problem with him this year wasn't just not being able to spread the field well, but really it went in hand with a couple of things. One, it was he went into his walk year without having a contract extension when the Mets basically didn't even consider much of him because they were too concerned about Francisco Lindor, and that went all the way to the deadline, as we know. So he had that looming as it was all season long. He also dealt with some injuries throughout the season too, which I think definitely put a hamper on his game. And the Marlins have shown interest too. Really hope he doesn't stay in the division because that would kill me. And I know he'd kill the Mets, but yeah, there's definitely a lot to like about Michael Conforto. I think he's a guy that is going to be one of the sneakiest pickups for whatever team lands him this offseason.
The Yankees have announced their 2022 coaching staff. Joining Aaron Boone for his 5th season as Yankees manager will be bench coach Carlos Mendoza, pitching coach Matt Blake, who did an excellent job in his first season, bullpen coach Mike Harkey, assistant pitching coach Desi Druschel, hitting coach Dylan Lawson, who we did a video on a couple of weeks ago, assistant hitting coaches Eric Chavez and Casey Dykes, and third base and outfield coach Luis Rojas, along with first base and infield coach Travis Chapman. I like the addition of Eric Chavez as an assistant hitting coach. I always thought his swing was tailor-made for Yankee Stadium. He was also a pretty good third baseman. I shouldn't say pretty good. He's a really good third baseman, so he should be able to help out with any extra instruction needed over there for the third baseman. So what does it mean that Aaron Judge has not gotten an extension yet? Something that's always been interesting to me is that the Yankees like to hand out big contracts to free agents, even guys who haven't proven that they can play in New York. Meanwhile, They tend to take extremely difficult stances with their own players when it comes time to renegotiate. When Andy Pettitte left the Yankees to pitch for the Astros in the 2003-2004 offseason, one of the reasons was because the Yankees didn't try hard enough to sign him. Eventually, he had a handshake deal to take $31 million from the Houston Astros, and only then did the Yankees up their offer to $39 million, and Andy rejected that on principle, not wanting to go back on his handshake agreement with the Astros owner. When Derek Jeter was a free agent, the negotiations were particularly tough, and Brian Cashman reportedly told Derek Jeter to his face that he'd rather have Troy Tulowitzki playing shortstop for the Yankees. Jeter is known to take even the slightest bit of disloyalty in an extremely personal way, and I'd argue that his relationship with the Yankees hasn't been the same since that offseason. He should be working with the Yankees right now, not the Marlins. And I get it. He bought into the Marlins. He wasn't going to be able to do that with the Yankees, but if he wanted to, he could have been an executive with the Yankees and made endless money and helped to shape the team for decades. But because Cashman told him to his face that he'd rather have Troy Tulowitzki, Jeter's place with the Yankees has been reduced to the occasional appearance to honor teammates. The 1998 Yankees negotiated especially hard with Bernie Williams, who was asking for 7 years and $70 million. After constant stalling, Bernie eventually became a free agent, and the Yankees ended up having to pay 7 years and $87.5 million, which was still not as much as he was offered by the Boston Red Sox and the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Yankees undervalue their own players in free agency. They tend to overvalue them as prospects, which we'll get to in just a second, but they definitely undervalue them in free agency. The lesson here is that the Yankees need to pay attention to what happened with Bernie Williams and avoid paying more. Aaron Judge seems motivated, saying during a recent batting practice session that he believes he's going to hit 50 home runs again in 2022. We know he's done it before. Why not do it again in a contract year? With the rising costs of free agents, what if he does? The Yankees could end up paying a lot more to secure the newly married Judge than if they signed him right now. The smart move for the Yankees offseason would have been to re-sign Aaron Judge before the lockout so that the team would know how much money they have committed going forward. Now, because of the uncertainty with Aaron Judge's contract, the Yankees may need to forego other big free agents such as Carlos Correa, which makes you, at minimum, several wins better in 2022. It's a tricky situation, and the Yankees have only themselves to blame. I've been a Yankees fan since about 1987, and for as long as I can remember, the Yankees have been hyping up their prospects. I feel like I'm always waiting for that next batch of baby bombers, and there's always one or two untouchable prospects that the Yankees refuse to part with in any big trade. There was a time when the Yankees didn't acquire a prime Randy Johnson because they wouldn't part with Ricky Leday. And to be fair, Ricky Leday had some nice moments. Big hit in the World Series off of Kevin Brown. A nice catch late in David Cohn's perfect game. But it would have been cool to have a prime Randy Johnson. Leday was eventually traded a few years later for David Justice. Nick Johnson was another untouchable prospect. Drew Henson was considered a can't-miss prospect that no Yankees fans wanted to see traded. Phil Hughes stood between the Yankees and prime Johan Santana. Jesus Montero was supposed to be the second coming. All of these prospects had high ceilings, but for every homegrown monster like Aaron Judge, there's a dozen or more guys who have their moments, but shouldn't have stopped the Yankees from making a big blockbuster deal for an established, reliable player. Some of the best homegrown prospects seem to come out of nowhere. Robinson Cano was someone the Rangers could have had as a throw-in as part of the Alex Rodriguez trade, but they passed. A few years later, he was an MVP candidate. I thought it would be interesting to go back and look at some of the top prospects list over the last decade or so and see how the prospect rankings worked out. And then we'll go over the 2022 top prospect rankings from Baseball America, and I'll offer up my own personal ranking. 2010, Jesus Montero was the big name on the list. He made it to the Yankees but was traded to the Mariners and fizzled out. Manny Banuelos was another guy fans were excited about that didn't pan out. Gary Sanchez ranked just behind Austin Romine. Mark Melancon became a pretty good big league reliever. Former first-round pick Slade Heathcott was in there at number 7. He never really did much and had a ton of injuries. 2011, we see that Gary Sanchez has shot all the way up to number 2, now 4 slots ahead of Romine. Eduardo Nunez became a pretty good hitter, but he can never really play much defense. And Hector Noesi ended up getting traded. Andrew Brackman, big, tall right-hander, threw hard, but couldn't stay healthy. In 2012, you can see that Gary has shot up to number 1. We also get Mason Williams on the list. Ton of speed, but never hit very much. Dante Bichette Jr., he was supposed to be what Bo Bichette actually became. Tyler Austin in there at number 9. Serviceable relievers, David Phelps and Adam Warren also on the list. So this was a pretty solid year for prospects. 2013, Mason Williams up to number 1. Gary falls to number 3 after struggling in the minors. Not much else on this list worth noting. You see Manny Banuelos beginning to fall. 2014, we get the first appearance of Eric Jagielo, former first-round pick who never did much, and somebody named Aaron Judge, fresh off of being drafted in 2013. Greg Bird and Luis Severino both made their first appearance in the rankings. Ian Clarkin was a lefty that I thought was going to be a stud, but he had some injury issues. 2015 was a pretty good year for predictions. Severino at number 1, Judge at number 2, Jacob Lindgren in there at number 6. He absolutely blew away minor league hitters, had a nasty slider, but his arm eventually fell off. Miggy Two Bags in there at number 9. 2016, Aaron Judge, once again number 1. He made his debut that season. Jorge Mateo shot all the way up to number 2. Gary Sanchez made his debut in 2016, and that was fantastic. He was in there at number 3. Dustin Fowler, one of the toughest MLB debuts ever, tore his patella tendon and was never the same. 2017, Glaber jumps up to number 1 on the prospect rankings after being traded from Chicago. Red Thunder in there at number 2 after coming over from the Indians. Blake Rutherford was supposed to be a can't-miss sure thing, eventually traded. Justice Sheffield, another midseason acquisition in there at number 7. He was later traded for James Paxton. Sheffield posted a 6.83 ERA in Seattle this past year, and Paxton has been basically a journeyman since with a ton of injuries. 2018, we see Esteban Florial jump to number 2. Albert Abreu in there at number 6. He seemed to be maturing as a pitcher this year. Good fastball control, got a little bit better. Tyro Estrada had some nice moments for the Yankees, did a nice job with the Giants this season. 2019, Johnny Lasagna in there at number 1. He was actually a starting pitcher in the minor leagues, but has since blossomed in the bullpen. Davy Garcia in there at number 4. Michael King makes his first appearance in there at number 7. He matured a lot as a pitcher this year. Ronzi Contreras in there at number 8, later traded to the Pirates. 2020, we get the first appearance of the Martian, Jason Dominguez at number 1. Davy Garcia in there at number 3. The Yankees ruined him this season. Anthony Volpe, fresh off of his first-round pick, in there at number 6. 2021, Clark Schmidt was preseason number 1 for the Athletic. I've never liked his mechanics. It makes his command iffy at best. Luis Medina ranked above Luis Gil, but Gil made it to the bigs quicker. I chose this list for a reason. Noticeably absent, Anthony Volpe. You can't predict baseball, Susan. 2022 preseason list from Baseball America has Volpe at number 1, Peraza at number 2, Dominguez all the way down at number 3, Hayden Wisniewski in there at a bit of a surprise, number 6. They left Everson Pereira off. Luis Medina in there at number 9. And now the fun part. Based on all of the prospects I've seen over the years and everything that I've read and watched looking at these guys all winter, all season long, my top 10 prospect rankings are as follows. I got Volpe at number 1. I love his swing. He's a local kid. Yankees fan. That always helps. Everson Pereira is my number 2. His swing is just electric to me. Reminds me of the pop that Alfonso Soriano had. I've elevated Luis Gil to number 3. I loved everything I saw from him last season. And once he tidies up his command a little bit, he's going to be an extremely dangerous pitcher. For me, Dominguez falls to number 4. He struck out a bit too much in the minors, and he's gotten a bit too big to be a center fielder. Peraza at number 5. I've got Trey Sweeney at number 7. I think he could rise fast, however, he's got a great swing. Ken Waldichuk is my dark horse candidate to make the rotation at some point next season, just like Luis Gil did, and Luis Medina also has a shot. As far as untouchable, there's really only 2 players on my list that I wouldn't trade under any circumstances. Anthony Volpe is my number 1 guy. I'm keeping him. I'm not dealing him. I want to see what he can do, even if he has to move off the shortstop. And then Everson Pereira. I just think he's going to be an electric player, and I wouldn't move him. Let me know your prospect rankings in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Oh my gosh. Does that suck?